All right, everybody. Hey, it's Marc Ross. I'm here with my good friend Gerald Ashley. Gerald, how you doing? What's happening?
I'm well, Mark. We've managed to avoid one another for 3 months, but the inevitable has happened and we're back together again. So, what's new?
We're back. Yeah, we're back. We can't be stopped. We have a new show. We're calling it The Ructions with Ross and Ashley. And the plan is to come together, every 2 weeks, every fortnight, as you would say, and have a little chat about geopolitics and, the silliness of the world.
Well, there's always something going on, and I think it's a good job we're back because there's a load of things on the menu at the moment, isn't there?
Well, everything from Gwyneth Paltrow to international trade deals. Yeah, we can cover the whole gamut of issues.
I'm really pleased you've headlined the most important story at the top there, Gwyneth Paltrow, who not being a huge movie fan, I'm not that adjacent to her obviously stellar career. And I may be one of the few people in the globe who wasn't that worried she lost half a day skiing, but there you go.
Well, I found the key source for the Gwyneth Paltrow trial. She was presumed Gwynnocent last night. Gwynnocent, get that?
Right.
Has been LA Magazine. LA Magazine has been covering the trial, everything from her fashion, what she's been wearing, to also where she's been staying. She's been apparently renting a house for $5K a day in a very exclusive neighborhood of Park City. So,
Well,
it's all there.
it's all this attention to detail that marks out first class journalism, isn't it? Really. I mean,
Well,
great.
I bookmarked that neighborhood. I was like, I've never even, well, of course, I've been to Park City many times. And I, of course, had never heard of this neighborhood. So that gives you a sense of my economic accessibility.
Righto.
All right, let's get into it. We're going to talk about first the CPTPP.
I didn't see that. Ah, there we are. Yes.
There we go. What the
that
heck is the CPTPP? Da da da.
yeah, that really trips off the tongue, doesn't it? It sounds like a sort of dyslexic version of the old USSR. I'm trying to remember exactly what it stands for. It's the Comprehensive and something Trans-Pacific something else. What it really is a big global trade deal which has been around for a long time. Those with good memories remember the United States were going to be involved at one stage, and then it didn't get ratified, and they dropped out. And then China tried to knock on the door, but I think the world's moved on then. And now, who should rock up but that well-known Pacific nation, Great Britain? So, what is going on here? Well, I suppose it's about the fact that the world is sort of reshaping into different blocks. And this trade bloc might actually marry quite well with some of the defense blocks that seem to be built. It hasn't got India in it. There's quite a laundry list of countries here: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan. It goes on and on, Peru, even Vietnam. I suppose the standout is that India isn't in it, but they're an economy that is highly protected, not very open at all to
Yeah.
sort of arrangements. So I don't think that seems very likely. What's in
You
it for?
gotta, India has to protect that amazing ambassador car, so you can see why they would want to protect the
Exactly.
market.
No, that's a fair comment. What's in it for Britain? Well, some people have been making sort of snide remarks. Well, how crazy is to be in a trade bloc? It's the other side of the world, but we have to start thinking about the world in terms of services as well as in just tradable goods. There's a terrible tendency, I think, for us to talk in tradable goods, not least of which television news can show something. Cranes moving stuff on and off ships, and
Hundred
all this
percent.
kind of stuff.
Stuff that goes into boxes. There's nothing.
Exactly, and
Trade is, it's
yeah, and it kind of
oftentimes displayed as like a box.
yeah, and
You
it
know.
kind of feels real and tangible and everything. But the simple fact of the matter is that the UK's economy is more than half of it, much more than half of it is services. Services are a sort of a kind of a flat world. You can deliver a service in Malaysia pretty much as easy as you can in Manchester. With certain limitations. So it makes sense to be involved in these global alliances. Will it make a big deal straight away? No. Is it a big deal? Potentially, yes, because a lot of these countries are really strong growth areas. So whether Britain can manage to, hook on the back of that, we shall see. But I think it's a positive move.
I think it's very positive for Rishi Sunak in the sense that I think it's the biggest trade deal the UK has signed up since Brexit. It shows a commitment to the world. It puts the global Britain back in global Britain. So I think it's a really strong statement. I think it's been noticed in the States within the kind of the trade crowd. If the UK can do this, why can't the US? But I think it's overall, obviously I'm a free trader. I'm pro globalization. I think it's a super strong commitment, but I think it's really a strong commitment, really, for Rishi Sunak to get this over the line and say, hey, we're going to be a part of the world. And I think from that standpoint, it's really, in the short term, very positive.
Yeah, and it gets a lot of trade barriers down, and it ticks all the boxes for opening things up. It doesn't make a dramatic amount of difference between now and this time next year, but in years to come, I think it could actually be highly significant. And as I say, the sort of mirror image to this, or close cousin, or whatever analogy you like, are all these defense pacts that are getting welded together. Um, from a Chinese perspective, an anti-China coalition almost, and but that's the way of the world, I think.
Do you think, with being a Brit yourself, do you think of, I mean, generally, do you think people in the UK think of themselves as a Pacific power? Obviously, the relationship with Hong Kong, the relationship with New Zealand, Australia.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to be of a vintage to even remember when we were sort of hauling flags down, and the famous withdrawal from east of Suez, as it was called, which I think was really mainly in the late 60s. But it does reinforce the fact that the UK has never really been that close to continental Europe, despite what everybody says, and despite what geography of 26 miles to France and Calais and all the rest of it. But in many ways, the UK has always been apart from Europe, and not just in trade terms. It's been in defence terms. I mean, we've been a bad actor in many ways in European geopolitics, because we've always teamed up with what looked like the losing side against the dominant one. So we've either we've either been with France against Germany, or we've been with Germany against France, and that's gone on for hundreds of years. So I think Europeans are right to maybe distrust British intentions, and I think the defence aspect of this is really interesting, because at the end of the day, Britain has no history of a large standing army. And so we don't have a strong military capability to offer Ukraine, for example. We've got a
right.
certain amount of kit and equipment, but we don't have boots on the ground or anything remotely like that. The argument is that we're quite denuded from a defence point of view as it is. But where we have, rightly or wrongly, invested a huge amount of money is in a blue ocean fleet. And so we still just about, and I would say only just about, have a global presence in the Royal Navy. And I think that's the future again, actually.
But I think having a Navy, I don't know, there's a great quote. I mean, I'm going to butcher it, but the essence of it is, you really can't have a real nation without a Navy. And I think, obviously, the UK and Britain's commitment to the Navy is super powerful. A show I just watched, actually, kind of pirated on YouTube, Warship Tour of Duty, which is a 6-part documentary,
Right.
BBC, fantastic. It follows the Queen Elizabeth on its maiden voyage, which
Oh,
went all the
yes.
way from I think Portsmouth to Tokyo and back, and Eastern Med, went through India, South China Sea. And that's a hell of a ship. A lot of tech, a lot of equipment, and that was a powerful commitment. Now we have this trade deal, so I don't know. I think it's very bullish,
You,
very
you
positive.
can you can see a way forward. And I think what I find, I don't know if I find puzzling or even disappointing, the European attitude is still that, well, Britain should rejoin, that Britain should get back in with a sort of unruly child that won't kind of play ball. But all the evidence suggests to me that Europe would be better off without Britain, actually. That seriously, in the same way as, can you imagine if Sterling had joined the euro? What a complete shambles that would have been. I mean, it's so obvious that we're marching to a slightly different drum, if you like. There's a slightly different rhythm to the way things work.
We
And
may disagree though. I don't know. I think most trade is done next door, like to your neighbors. So, I don't know. We can debate that and control and
and
EU and,
we're not, I may still have an occasional glass of French wine. It doesn't change, a lot of those sort of things, but you can't. There are other bigger factors in play. I mean, one of the big ones in Europe is demographics, and this is playing out in France at the moment. The demographic situation is not good in Europe, and it's going to be a slow coach economy. And the current administration in Germany that seems hell bent on deindustrializing Germany and driving many German industries away from Germany seems quite extraordinary to me.
well,
So,
they're all coming to the States. We're happy to have them. It's fantastic.
well, I'm afraid it's. I'm afraid you were right last year when we were talking about sanctions and everything with Ukraine. The big winners in all of this are the natural gas producers in North America. I mean, they've had a bonanza time, and that isn't going to change. But I mean, back to the focal point here is that maybe for everybody concerned, it's better that Britain does these sort of deals and that Europe actually gets on. And if Europe is serious about wanting to create some form of United States or Europe or whatever, let them get on with it. And I personally don't think it'll happen, but I could well be wrong. But I don't see why why the British should be the troublesome, awkward squad that's in the way. So we'll go off and cause trouble elsewhere.
Now, point taken. I do think maybe from a strategic standpoint, you're playing to your strengths as a nation, and certainly the Blue Water Navy, thinking globally, services. Maybe in 10 years' time, we'll see this as a smart move.
We're not an energy giant, and we have a government that's hell bent on not fracking natural gas, which is another rather eccentric decision, in my view.
We're not a energy superpower yet.
No. So, I mean, we've got where's our comparative advantage? It's certainly not in heavy industry. There may be some comparative advantages in some industry, maybe pharmaceuticals, for example, and some of the chemical industry. But a lot of it is in sort of high tech and services. So there's a lot of high tech stuff here, and there's a lot of services here, and that lends itself to a global marketplace rather than a regional one.
Love it. Speaking of, I don't know if this is a great transition, but we're going to talk about South Africa, what's happening down there. South Africa, another part of the world, super interesting. I'm going to turn it over to you. I've never been. I'm desperate to go. I hear great things. I don't know. But from a government standpoint, it seems like it's in a bit of a tough spot currently.
I think it could be the big story of the next 18 months, actually. Not that we lack stories elsewhere, but clearly, both anecdotally and factually, the South African economy is in serious trouble. We've got to a situation now where power cuts or power outages are pretty much institutionalized into the daily rhythm of life. The power company actually gives advanced timetables now of future power cuts, which are on a daily basis. This doesn't seem to be a sustainable way of running a modern economy, whether you're in services, goods, or agriculture, or whatever else. The root of the problem, and it's a ticklish one because there are all sorts of sensitivities, I suppose, but the root of the problem is really the ANC, which is not just the ruling government; it's the overwhelming party that the overall electorate vote for, and it's not even an open secret. It's a fact that it's a deeply corrupt outfit, and we've had all sorts of problems with the ANC government under Zuma, and Cyril Ramaphosa arrived on the scene as Mr. Clean, and it doesn't seem to have made any difference. Quite how much he is in charge of all of what goes on, Lord only knows. But political trouble at home and economic trouble at home makes you vulnerable or willing to find new bedfellows.
Yeah.
And who should who should suddenly arrive on the scene but Mr. Putin, who's looking for friends? And so I think this is an angle that needs to be watched.
Yeah, I think 2 points. I think, give or take, I think South Africa as a democracy or when apartheid ends is probably 30 years, maybe 40, somewhere in there. But I do think 30 years is an interesting number for a country. I'll give you 2 points. Ukraine, 30 years independence, the
Yeah.
US, 30 years, give or take independence. We had the scrap War of 1812 with the Brits. So there's like a generational thing, it hasn't really set, and you have the governments in place. Certainly there's corruption, there's no doubt, but 30 years in, democracies are pretty fragile. So I think that's an important point to watch. Your point about Russia looking for friends, I don't know if Jim O'Neill is one of your buddies. I imagine you've hung out with Jim O'Neill from
Yeah.
Goldman, and he came up with the great term BRIC, BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Yes.
And interesting enough, the Chinese and the Russians said, "Hey, we need a friend in Africa. Let's add the S." Which really Jim O'Neill never intended to. It never made economic sense, but it's gotten lumped in. Now we have the BRICS, which is really interesting. How this Goldman Sachs term has been hijacked by Putin and Xi to find a friend in Africa. The geopolitics of it, super interesting.
Well, never mind I suppose. But I think yeah, and there are lots of games going on here. China's playing, as usual, a long game. Russia, I think, is scrabbling around a little bit for friends. And South Africa just looks kind of a sort of country that could sort of fall into that sort of sphere of influence, which has got to be bad news for the West.
Well, just where it is on the map, certainly, at an intersection, very important part of the world, and on the oceans there. And also, I think there's a lot of hope and interest in South Africa, certainly here in the States. I think, when you mention an African nation, South Africa is routinely mentioned. If you were to say where are you going, what's interesting, I think, from a tourist destination, I don't really know anybody, frankly, who's doing any kind of commerce in South Africa other than kind of tourism. And maybe it punches above its weight because it has like this affinity. People want South Africa to succeed in the West, but it doesn't seem to have happened yet.
No, I mean they certainly lack any sort of any soft power that they could exercise, and they've got quite a lot with, as you say, with tourism. They've got a very good wine industry, which in a way is amazing, is keeping going, given all the disruptions in the economy and all the rest of it. And of course, they're sitting on a lot of natural resources, but in a way, that is a example or a lesson that you can have those natural riches, but to coin a phrase, it doesn't necessarily make you wealthy. It's how you manage that, and it's how you keep it for future generations and look after it. And to me, South Africa seems to be in a bit of a downward spiral. Whether that is very serious yet, I don't know. But as I say, I think the next 18 months could be a crunch point.
What's interesting is our Vice President, Kamala Harris, is in Africa right now. I know she visited Ghana, Tanzania, and I'm not sure what the third country is, but South Africa wasn't on the agenda.
Right.
I know one of her speeches was like, not committing, but really encouraging Americans to invest more in Africa. I don't know if I've ever told you a story. When I was with the U.S.-China Business Council, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, came to one of our board meetings, and you presume the conversation would be about U.S.-China, which it was, but one of the most interesting topics that CEOs brought up was U.S. commitment in Africa. How, like, if you're a CEO thinking 20, 30 years out, how we're not there. And I think there's going to be a big push by the U.S. government to encourage more trade, economic development, people-to-people exchanges, just getting to know Africa better. And whether South Africa is going to be one of the beneficiaries, I don't know. It could be more of the sub-Saharan Central African nations that benefit.
I mean, obviously the other giant on the continent is Nigeria, but that's hardly well run either. And so there's a sort of almost a race to the bottom in terms of bad governance. Whereas
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, they really should be big players on the global stage, both of those countries, but then they're just not harnessing their natural advantages.
It seems like if you're a CEO, you want to be the first second, right? You don't want to be, who's going to be the first CEO to open up auto plant in Nigeria, right?
Right.
Is VW going to commit, $3 billion to build a battery plant in an African nation? That's like, where we're at. So right now, that's going to be an interesting take. Who's going to be first to kind of make that big push, and who's going to get the protections by their representative governments to make sure these investments don't go south.
I'm reminded of a quote by the Scottish or then American industrialist Andrew Carnegie. And Carnegie made the comment that pioneering don't pay. It's worth remembering that he was second in the steel industry. He wasn't first. Henry Bessemer was the guy who did all the work and the Bessemer process. And he made a lot of money, but he made a fraction of what Andrew Carnegie did. And I think this is true.
I always want to be the first second, there's a lot of dead pioneers on the plane. I'll be right behind you.
I think, that kind of Me Too, let's join in now. There's a critical mass is where a lot of money is made. And as you say, it's a much less risky bet. None of this plays well for Africa, I don't think, that attitude.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also, there's an AGOA. We do have a trade deal, I know, in the States it's called the AGOA. I don't know what that stands for, but I don't know. I think we should explore more of Africa. Maybe in our upcoming episodes, we'll do a deeper dive on another nation where we think maybe we can see some positive investments instead of South Africa. But definitely South Africa, a country to watch, no doubt about it. I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, another country to watch. The Fifth Republic, France.
We're back to our close neighbors.
What is happening? Actually,
I have a bit of breaking news here, which will probably cause you to be on the floor and the viewers and listeners. I'm feeling quite pro-President Macron at the moment.
Oh my gosh!
Stop
the tape. Stop the tape.
Yeah, no, it's I don't worry. I haven't had a good lunch or anything. It's what I genuinely think. Simply because in the current state of affairs, he is actually the voice of reason. We've got a lot of strikes and rioting and demos and all the rest of it about shock horror, the pension age going up from 62 to 64. And as he has gently pointed out, the French economy cannot afford pensions at the rate of 62. They probably can't afford them at a rate of 64. There's quite a stunning statistic that after the war, there were 4 workers for every retired person. Right. That is now down to 1.7 workers for every one retiree. And France is heading very rapidly towards 1.5 or even 1.4. So something's going to have to shift. Now, what I think is interesting, and I think it would be interesting to hear your take on this, he's a second-term president. He's only into his first year, second term. Now, the American view is, oh, well, he'd be a lame duck and he's kind of, just seeing his time out and will go on lots of foreign tours and all this sort of stuff. Whereas, funnily enough, Macron, I think, has realized if he's going to shift things in France, he doesn't have to run for office or can't run for office again, so he can afford to be unpopular. And I think he's going to try and face these guys down. And whether that will work or not, will it lead to a crisis or not? But I don't see him backing down at all because in a funny sort of way, he's got nothing to lose because, he's got no electoral pressures in the future. And I think we sometimes forget the French presidency is an amazingly powerful position. It's much more powerful than the United States president.
100%.
Executive power. So watch this space. Lots of lots of photo opportunities of, you know, what you guys would call burning dumpsters or bins or whatever.
There's been a lot of memes circulating that, you know, Paris
yeah,
is wonderful in the spring, you know.
yeah, some great stuff like that. But it's, you know, something is going to have to shift, and I think it'll be
I think
interesting.
I think what Macron has done is obviously brilliant. He's pushing it. I think the timing of it is exquisite as well, because in 2024 the summer games come to Paris, and I think there's going to be such a honeymoon, such a love affair of the global sports, the pageantry, that, you know, a lot of there's going to be so much money splashing around through these Olympic Games that, you know, some of the animosity is going to go away. So the timing of it, doing it in 23, moving ahead, and frankly, you know, the rest of the world is like, are you kidding me? You're adding 2 more years. I saw a stat today from Ogilvy. This is a macro global stat, but basically the stat that Ogilvy put out was there's more 60-year-olds on the planet than there are 5-year-olds. So, you know, the planet's getting older. And as you rightly point out, there's less workers. And frankly, you know, France needs to work 2 more years. And, you know, we're not talking some extraordinary amount of time, you know.
One factoid that struck me was that the policemen who were busy throwing CS gas canisters and hitting everybody over the head have a retirement of age, and wait for this, of 52. Um, and again, there is this sort of social contract in France that the so-called fonctionnaires, government officials, even quite low down ones, have phenomenally good pensions and early ones. And frankly, this is not affordable.
My guess too is the way it was pushed through. You know, people are saying it was undemocratic, you know, because he superseded the assembly. But I'm guessing there are a lot of politicians in the assembly that didn't want to take that vote, and were happy for Macron to take the heat, and that they agree with this policy, and they know it's the right thing for the country.
Sure.
Secondly, I think, as we've talked about before, these kind of protest movements, usually they're amalgamation. You know, it's not focused, and I'm guessing, you know, a third to 40% of the people protesting just generally despise Macron in general, regardless of what he was working on, and that created hostility. You know, I don't think it's solely dedicated just to the pension age, and I think that's going to hurt the effort in the long term.
It's, you know, there's an air of unreality about some of these things, and things will have to change. And to just round it off, Madame Le Pen, remember her? She hasn't gone away. She's back climbing in the polls with the stunningly brilliant idea of cutting the pension age from 62 to 60. You know, what are we supposed to do with these politicians? I don't know. But I think you're right about Macron's timing, because if he pulls this off or he faces people down, it'll be brilliant for a clean run of, you know, global France in 2024.
Yeah, but definitely a space to watch. I've been preparing. I want to write about this more. It's super interesting culturally too. It just seems that I don't know. It's part of doing business in France. You know, like there should be a good protest every few years.
There's a lot of box ticking. There's a lot of form filling, I can tell you.
Well, let's talk about some other form filling. Trump last night, 34 count indictment, possibly to be arrested on Tuesday. I haven't been paying much attention to this, frankly, so I don't have much to add. But, you know, I would say 34 counts is a lot more than I think
it's
expected. I think. Well, let me say two other things. I think Trump running for office was one of the dumbest things he's ever done. I think, you know, there's plenty of shady real estate development in the country's happy to do that. But when you run for president and you're a bit of a jerk, you know, there's going to be paybacks. And I think the other thing I want to add is that, you know, this investigation has been going on for 5 years. We have an untacit rule: you can't be arrested while you're president. But, you know, when you're not president.
I think timing plays a part here as well, because if it was this time next year, then people would say this is now interfering with the political process,
Correct.
So this is the last time to do this before American political cycle really warms up, I suppose. I have no idea, you know, about guilt or lack of guilt or whatever, false accounting or whatever.
Oh, he's innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. No, fair enough. But
we don't have the Ructions show sued by Team Trump, so let's put that out there.
Yeah,
allegedly, you know, these are alleged crimes.
absolutely. We're, sort of free and fair to all. I think I just imagine his approach will be to make a lot of hullabaloo, and the circus will be back in town, and there'll be a lot of nonsense on speeches and television, and he's going to play the victim card. Now, whether that will work or not, I have no idea, but I just suspect that's what we've got coming for the next few months.
Well, definitely the circus. There's a headline story yesterday in the AP, CNN ratings all-time low. And then, 3 hours later, Trump indictment. And CNN at one point had 8 presenters on the stage talking about this. They had people outside the courthouse. I mean, so.
And there's
Services of America is back.
There's an element. There is a political element to this. If nothing else, he's going to swallow a lot of oxygen away from other Republican candidates, isn't he? I mean,
just 100%. I mean, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I will set a quiz that I will have trouble with. I can think of other candidates, Ron DeSantis, and I am now struggling, which I know that's not very good. I should be able to name 2 or 3 others, but they're pretty invisible, these guys at the moment, and how they're going to fight for attention in this sort of summer that's coming ahead of when things really get going, I don't know, but we'll see, I suppose.
Well, the first debate was August, and I haven't told you this, Gerald, but I think we should take the Ructions on the road to Milwaukee for some of the first debate in Wisconsin on Lake Michigan. So
Wisconsin, wow, that sounds far too.
Do you even know where Wisconsin is?
Well, it's somewhere. It's abroad, isn't it? It's somewhere. Don't you normally fly over Wisconsin?
It's just west of the Lake District. Yeah, it's just west of the Lake District.
Yeah, no, I do know where it is. Lake Wabegon, isn't it, amongst others?
Yeah, any kind of those.
I think it was.
That might be New Hampshire, actually. I don't even know myself. Anyways, all right. I think that was a good discussion. Let's finish it up with what we're reading and watching.
What we're reading and watching. Well, I've got nothing.
You want to go first?
Well, book first of all. Then here's a nice slim tome for you. It's 1,260 pages. I bought it in early January.
What's the carbon footprint on that book?
Oh yeah, an entire forest is just for this copy I've got here. 1,260 pages. It's called The World, A Family History, and it's by a very well-known historian called Simon Sebag Montefiore. He's written some very good books. He's written an excellent book about Stalin, for example. Anyhow, this book is really a world history through the prism of various families, whether it be the Medicis in finance, whether it various royal houses in Europe, and importantly for somebody like me, an absolute big lump of history about China and the Far East, of which I know nothing.
It's a good book. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, it is a good book. It's actually a very light read, but it's a sort of dive in and read. It's in quite small chapters or sections. Read maybe 20 or 30 pages and learn up about something. It's very good. It's got a slight, to me, semi-reference feel to it rather than a straight read through. But I would.
So are you finding it? Are you reading it while you're reading another book? I mean, is that kind of like you'll do a chapter or two?
Yeah, exactly. But it's not heavy. It's not a heavy read. It's very well written. It's particularly interesting. It maybe is a corrective for some of us who've got a very Western-centric view of the world. So, as I say, The World is the title. It's a bestseller over here. I think it's just out in the States, and I would think it would do very well there as well.
Yeah, it's like kind of one of those cocktail circuit books that everybody's chatting about. So,
and of course, if you need to jam a door open, it's absolutely perfect because it's knocking on 2 inches thick. I mean, good grief. In terms of what I'm watching, nothing new, but I've been watching a couple of old things. It's prompted by watching the sequel to the Gene Hackman film, The French Connection. I saw French Connection 2, and I was struck by the fact that, a lot of sequels are tired rehashes that studios push out quickly because they think they can cash in a second time round. But
it's all about the franchise. All about the franchise.
Exactly. But in terms of French Connection 2, it's an excellent film and it stands on its own. first-class director in Frankenheimer. And if you haven't seen it or only seen the first one, very much recommended. Gene Hackman in good form. And then maybe not playing to my view quite so strongly. It's a film called The Two Jakes, which is Jack Nicholson, and he is in the sequel to his famous film Chinatown. Now, Chinatown was a roaring success and is a fantastic film.
Absolute classic, Chinatown. I haven't seen The Two
Yeah.
Jakes, but Chinatown is one of the greatest movies ever made.
I would agree with that. And The Two Jakes, I think, stands up really well. But it was panned when it came out. There were a lot of financing and problems on production and all the rest of it, and it was very delayed. A lot of cast changes, but it got out through the door, but it got a very muted response. But I think now it's, I don't know what we call it. Is it the art house crowd have now decided it's kind of a cult movie? And so I'm trying to polish up my credentials in that area by saying I like this film as well. And it is a good film. So I'd recommend people to watch The Two Jakes as well.
Love it. I just finished this book, War, How Conflict Shaped Us. It's by Margaret MacMillan, who I think is tied in with Oxford or some famous, but just really the cultural impact of war.
Right.
History, good stuff, great read. One of humans' great activities is war, pretty well. And then I've just started this, and I can't get enough of this book, Seeing Like a State, and it really traces the history of, how governments have organized everything from forest to, urban planning. And I've just found myself taking so many notes. It's an exquisite book. Absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly
so it's a kind of a primer is it a primer for somebody who really is interested in government or even governance and just, understanding how things.
What's more about, the subtitle is how certain schemes to improve humanity have failed. So, how bureaucrats and governments attempt to do the right thing, but maybe they fail. And, how we're living with some of those consequences today. And,
right.
There's a lot of good intentions by governments, but humans sometimes want to do differently.
Well, there is a tendency when you're at the top of something to think you know best and to push it all the way down. And that's the exact opposite of how evolutionary theory works. All new ideas spring from the bottom upwards, not top down.
Well, yeah, or they could be good ideas, frankly, but it's just tough to execute and get everybody on the same page. And there's a natural resistance, especially I think here in the States. Live free or die. If DC says something, there's a third of the country that's going to be against it just because of that.
It's the old Reagan joke, isn't it? Of the most dangerous words in the world are "I am from the government and I'm here to help."
Right, and, exactly.
I'm not certain that's his original quote. Other people say it goes back much earlier, but it kind of resonates, I suppose.
Well, it's probably like one of those, Mark Twain quotes where Twain gets credit for everything. Other show I'm watching, Make or Break. It's on Apple TV. It's about the World Surf League. It's kind of like a Drive to Survive. They follow these amazing surfers around the world, and great show. Put you in beautiful places, beautiful, sexy people on surfboards. What's not to like? Very enjoyable way to spend.
It's nice escapist. It's nice 100%. Escapist stuff. Sounds good.
After you read a book about war, you may want to watch some escapist television.
Exactly.
All right, Gerald, good to see you, buddy. The Ructions, we're back with Ross and Ashley. I'm Marc Ross. This is Gerald Ashley. I want to say hi to our friends, Rai Italia. We're still waiting. Yeah. I was at the, by the way, last night, I was at the Italian embassy, and the ambassador was there. Didn't get a chance to chat with her. But I was not arrested by the Carbonari, and apparently, I'm not wanted in Italy. So
you're edging closer to the more powerful circles in Italy. Just be careful which ones you mix with. That's all. But okay, good. Well, there we are. First episode out the way. Good stuff.
I love it. The Ructions. A lot of fun to chat with you, Gerald. We'll see you. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Indeed. Take care.
Ciao. All right. Let me stop the recording.
That was quite good. That was a little bit tighter. Which was quite good, I think.